Welcome to Season 4, Episode number 29 of the Outlap F1 Podcast. We are closing in on that summer break, but we're not quite there yet. It is the 2022 French Grand Prix Race Review, and as always, we are proud members of the Ship It Studios Podcast Network. You've got Andy, and I am with Deanna tonight. Dee, how's it going?
It's going well. It's getting really hot up here. It's the summer, and so I've just been hiding inside in the AC. So nothing else.
No, I think it's hot everywhere north of the equator right now, to be honest with you.
Brutal.
I know the UK was battling some sort of like mega heat wave last week. This race we're going to talk about, the weather was a huge factor. The heat was terrible in the region of France, and where we're going after this one. You think it's hot here? Wait till we see what the temperatures are like in the Hungaro ring next week. Woo! So, it is coming. It is hot. I classified this race as hot and slick, and we'll get into all that in just a little bit. And you can find our show, as always, on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and, of course, YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast. Please see our link tree in our show notes. If you're on YouTube, please do us a solid and click that like and subscribe button. If you're on your favorite podcasting app, click the 5-star button, especially for Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps us bring more content to you that much quicker, and we would appreciate it very much if you would do that. You can email our show, as always, at chatnow@outlapf1.com. You can find our website at www.outlapf1.com. If you are new to the sport, you've picked a great time to get on board. Welcome. Please do check out our F1 for Beginners. This is our Season 4, Episode 4. You can also check out the F1 for Beginners series. We've chopped it up a little bit on our YouTube channel as well. So please feel free to check all of that out. As always, thank you so much to our monetary supporters of the hashtag Outlap F1 Nation. Those fine folks are Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Cody Walsh, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, Mary Brown, Jonathan Scott, and Matt Polanski from the Red Sector MotoGP podcast. Thank you so much for your continued support. And if you'd like to become a member of the hashtag Outlap F1 Nation, please look at our link in our show notes. Any sort of funds go right back into the show. We've bought some new equipment recently. At least I still have to set up all my stuff. It's still in the box, but I pledge to do that by the end of the summer break. I pledge to do that. You can also, please feel free to check out the 20% off and free shipping from the good folks at Manscaped. Check that out, manscaped.com. That's the place to go to check out all their fine products. James is not with us tonight. If he was here, I don't know if he'd be modeling the Scuderia's back shirt based on tonight's results, but it is a good shirt. It's a good-looking shirt. Please feel free to check that out. It's the F1guy.com. That's our friend Vincenzo Landino and his shirt line. We also have our sponsor, Athletic Greens, which you can check out, www.athleticgreens.com/emerging for what, as James says, is a delicious and nutritious way to start out your day. I would highly recommend it. And our final sponsor, before we hop into everything proper, is the Portage Park Development Project, the thriving community in the Upland Metaverse. If you are from Chicago, Portage Park will sound familiar because the Upland Metaverse is based on real world cities and properties, and Portage Park is an actual neighborhood here in Chicago. The Metaverse version of Portage Park is the most developed neighborhood in Upland, with over 700 supportive members and property owners enjoying competitions, community initiatives, and local shops with monthly town hall meetings to connect with fellow Uplanders. And now racing has come to Upland. Portage Park is developing a racing team that is ready to fight for the top step of the podium. They have a training academy for drivers and racetracks in development, and most of their making the most of their shops and local attractions. They want to show the best that Portage Park has to offer. So come join them. Links to the Portage Park Discord server, racing track maps, and socials are in our podcast show notes. We hope to see you in the metaverse. All right, now that we've gotten the propers and particulars out of the way, we will hop into our headline of the day. D, I have a funny feeling I know where this is going to go, but take the floor. What did you got?
Congratulations to the 2023 world champion, Max Verstappen. After today, it feels pretty dismal. Somebody equated this to the feeling of Germany 2018 with Sebastian Vettel crashing out. and it just feels kind of dire now for Leclerc, especially. It is now, the gap went from 38 points to 63. Also now, I think it's probably going to be, well, if Mercedes continue to pick up the points like they have been when everybody else has mistakes, I think it's going to end up being more of a battle between Ferrari and Mercedes and the constructors than with Red Bull. So, and most of that is Ferrari's own doing. So I'm going to say 65% of the time have the best car easily. And they're just so far behind. So anyway, but we'll get to all that.
We will break all of that down in a little bit. My headline is, just about this today. The race that could have been. It was setting up. It was all there. You had Leclerc with the dominant car in the corners, and you had Max with the dominant car in the straight, and you didn't know how the tires were going to hold up and who was going to blink first on pit strategy, and were we going to get a one-stopper or a two-stopper. And then all rendered moot with the Leclerc mistake that robbed us of this potentially awesome grandstand finish. And it does then put Max Verstappen with, I'm not calling one whole hand yet, but I'm giving him 3 fingers on the 2022 Drivers' World Championship trophy. The math has gotten much, much harder for Charles Leclerc and for Ferrari today. And John has chimed in with a headline, and his is that Ferrari sucks so bad that it's not even funny anymore. Say what you want about Lewis Hamilton's title run, but at least he had, at a minimum, a teammate battling him week after week. Ferrari was our only hope of this being an interesting fight with Max, and therefore we have no hope at all. I guess John would say, help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi. We have no more hope. Bad Star Wars reference. Maybe that one falls flat. I don't know. But anyway. So before we get into the race proper and all of that, we actually did have the Saturday qualifying. If I can cue up my board here, we'll go through that in just a second. All right. So on Saturday, going out in P20, was the Williams of Nicholas Latifi. P19 was Mick Schumacher. P18 was Joe Granu. P17 was Lance Stroll. P16 was Pierre Gasly. P15 was Alex Albon. Going through, or actually he did go through to Q2. P14 was Sebastian Vettel. P13 was Valtteri Bottas. P12, Esteban Ocon. And P11, just missing out on the Q3 shootout, was Daniel Ricciardo. The top 10 from 10 to 1 in P10, although he did not set a lap time because he was headed to the back with engine penalties. That would be Kevin Magnussen. P9, although he did not set a lap time in Q3 either because he was heading to the back as well. That was the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. P8 was Yuki Tsunoda. P7, Fernando Alonso. P6 was George Russell. P5 was Lando Norris. P4 was Lewis Hamilton. P3 was Sergio Checo Perez. P2 was Max Verstappen. And he would certainly look good on Saturday. In P1 was the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Dee, any thoughts on the qualifying session?
Yeah, so I'm going to go in a little different direction from this, but this is the time where I want a point for pole. Sainz looked, granted he has a fresh new engine in the car, but very much looked like the faster Ferrari driver over the course of the weekend and in those Q1, Q2. But to see him then, good for Leclerc. He got dragged along in the slipstream from Sainz, but I would have loved to see Sainz have something to battle for. And as we get further into the season and more of these top drivers start taking engine penalties, they won't be pushing in Q3. And that kind of deprives us of a lot of those fun pole battles. So I wish there was some kind of incentive if we're really going to keep these engine allocations the way they are for something like that. I think that'd be fun. It would add a little bit of interest more in this championship for all of the poles Leclerc has had. But also my fun new fact for this weekend is Charles Leclerc, 16 poles, Max Verstappen, 16 poles. Charles Leclerc, 5 wins, Max Verstappen, 27 wins. So, yep, just do with that what you will.
Yeah, the Sunday matters.
Yes.
The Sunday matters. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. The interesting thing, when I was watching the Q2 session was, and granted, I knew at least a lot of the first runs were on used sets of soft tires, so they weren't necessarily indicative. And I did hear later on that there were some wind gusts that came up, especially in the Q2 session, that did affect some of the times. But Sainz was 9/10 clear of Verstappen in Q2. 9/10 in Formula One qualifying terms is massive. That's huge. So I'm like, wow. Like, if you've got that in your back pocket, how do you not convert this? But, again, it comes back to, the unfortunateness of last week with the engine failure in Austria. He's got to take more engine penalties. And you're right. We're going to see this second half of the season is going to be littered. They're all going to have to do it. And the honest answer is the rule needs to be changed. We're pushing maybe 24, 25 races. There's no way 3 power units can do it. It's just not feasible. I get we're trying to control costs, but come on, man. We got to come up with, if there's a rule that could get changed in the middle of the year, this would be one that I'd be in favor of. Forget about the whole flexi floor weirdness thing. Focus on this type of stuff because this affects what you see on Saturday and then what you show up to on Sunday as a fan, especially if you're a new fan, it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain why the guy who had the fastest car starts way in the back or the guy who had the fastest car qualified only in P9. It just doesn't make sense. But, fair play to the Ferraris. It was good team. This was good team execution. I might not say that for the rest of the weekend, but this was good team execution. Fourth team Ferrari on Saturday. They played within the rules. They did the job. And I guess kind of the other comment I would have, I'm surprised because Perez was struggling so much throughout the rest of the weekend leading up to this, that they didn't try to do the same thing and have him as the sacrificial lamb, but I guess they didn't need it in the end.
Yeah, I think when you're only going to have to battle one Ferrari, it's best to just try to get both of the Red Bulls up there. And then not have to really, or they thought they probably weren't going to have to deal with a Mercedes, but then they got into that later on in the weekend, but we'll get there. So yeah, but overall, interesting qualifying.
Yeah, the only other topic, and it wasn't as bad here as it was last week, but I did kind of feel for Mick Schumacher getting his lap time, especially in Q1. I thought Haas actually had a lot more pace than what any of the results actually showed. In, out, it's a matter of sometimes millimeters. To me, if you're going to do this, I would much rather inform the driver or inform them right away so they could do something with it, because you complete a lap here, you're using up all the tires, and then the lap's gone, and there's really nothing else you can do about it. Your hands are tied because it was so hot and because the tires were degrading so fast. So, yeah, I would love to have some sort of a sensor or something that goes off. It goes beep, the driver knows it, he pulls off, he aborts, and then can reset and maybe get another shot at it. But other than that, I hate the track limits thing, but I don't have a better solution other than to put walls everywhere. So, I guess it's literally kind of between a rock and a hard place with this rule.
Yep. I do feel like, everybody's been making the point where it's like, well, all the tracks with gravel, like they obviously don't go over track limits there, which I feel like, yes, it's true. But I think this season, I feel like is a bigger adjustment for the drivers because all of these tracks where they haven't had to do that in the past, whereas all those ones with gravel traps, they've obviously been doing that their entire careers. So I feel like I'm hopeful that like next year this becomes less of an issue as they kind of start getting more like seeing these circuits again and having these rules again and it kind of staying consistent from there. So hopefully that gets a little bit better, but I still think they should kind of up the at least in race allocation of like track limit numbers, but whatever. We talked about that last week.
Maybe 5 as opposed to 3, because I think it's like 5 is probably realistically what they're going to do. But there were no 5-second penalties in the race today, so at least we got 3. We did get through the whole race. We did not have any of that for track limits, at least. So we will now drop our green flag. We will head into the Sunday proper, and as usual, we will start with our back markers. And there's one interesting one. We're going to talk about it, get it out of the way now. Not classified Yuki Tsunoda, but the other not classified car starting in P1, he did not finish. That would be the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. He joined Kevin Magnussen, who did not finish, Nicholas Latifi, who did not finish. The first classified finisher, even though he stopped with 6 laps to go, was Joe Granu. Mick Schumacher was P15, P14 was Valtteri Bottas, and P13 was Alex Albon. But I think the main focus of this entire group is got to be on Leclerc and the Ferrari. He's in the lead, and he just drops it going into, I forget what the corner's name was, but he just dropped it and spun, hit the wall, game over from the lead. He had done a lot of the hard work already. He had fended off Verstappen already getting into the DRS early, and he managed to fend it off, and it looked like, okay, we're in the fight. Here we go. And then I don't get it. It just seemed like just a mistake. Dee, did you read it any different?
No, not really. I mean, it was just so unfortunate, and you just felt that guttural scream on the radio where he just, never seen him that kind of level of angry. So I think, but yeah, I thought Verstappen was just going to kind of rock up to the back of him and breeze past, but he did an incredible job through that first stint, holding him off. And then just to see that happen, like you said, kind of in the intro, it would have been such an interesting battle. But here's my first quarrel with the Ferrari strategy, which I think ideally, granted, he could have made this mistake any time, but maybe it would have prevented this. So Max pitted on lap 16. Granted, that was kind of early for a one-stop strategy, but I do not know why they didn't pit Leclerc immediately after.
Didn't cover him off, yeah.
I think they should have covered him off. By the time that Max, so he came out sector 2, 3 of his outlap, and then sector 1, he had made up the entire 1.5 second gap that Leclerc had. So he had already completely covered him off. And then would have continued to edge that out. I think he was probably going to lap over a second faster than whatever Leclerc was doing pre that pit stop. And then I just think after watching that first stint, I would want track position here. So I don't know why Ferrari didn't immediately cover them off. They saw that Leclerc can hold him up, so just cover off whatever he does each time, even if it's 1 stop, 2 stop. I think that makes more sense. I get they were going for 1 stop, but then Max was able to make the 1 stop work anyway. So I don't know why you leave yourself vulnerable to that personally, but.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a great point because Ferrari had to keep the track position. If Max gets by, I mean, their advantage was in the corners. You could not pass in a lot of these corners here with this track layout. That was just reality. The track wasn't wide enough to really do a lot of those types of moves. So your only really overtaking opportunities was basically turn 1 and at the end of that Mistral straight going into that chicane that they invented and maybe coming back out of there. That was really about it. And if you were what did they say? I think it was like 8 or 9 kilometers down, even with DRS on straight line speed with a Red Bull that has no DRS. That's massive. That's also massive in the other direction. So yeah, I would have thought the only way to do this was to keep him in clean air here as long as possible. I maybe it's hindsight is 2020. I got the call at the time. I wasn't super questioning of it because I thought actually Red Bull was committing to a 2 stop. And then with safety car coming out, it just rendered everything moot anyway. But yeah, I mean, you have the moments like you mentioned. I think it was Vettel in 2018 at Hockenheim, in the rain. You've got Lewis Hamilton in 2016 screaming about the engine failing him in Malaysia. It was that visceral of a response from Leclerc because, a race driver's brain works really fast. I think he knew exactly what that meant. And he's watching, as of this point, his best shot at a world championships really start to fade away. Yep. And how do you not feel for the guy? But, nobody else did it. As much as I want to blame Ferrari for anything else, he still dropped it in the corner. It looked like a spin. I hate to say this. It looked like a spin that you see on a Friday in free practice 1. Yeah.
But another thing that ended up hurting Ferrari with is that car never made it back to the garage. The tires never made it back to the garage. So they didn't have that data later on when Sainz was on that mediums of how long they could or would last. Even it was just, however, it was only 16 laps, but it would have been better than nothing that they had.
But nothing, yeah.
Because other than that, they just had what everybody else was doing, and nobody else at that point had stayed out on medium. So it just put them in a bad position later on, which we will get to. But
yep. All right. So I think we can leave Leclerc there. Sadly, now, did you think, or I guess one last question, did you think he was possibly able, even with the car in the barrier like it was, to possibly get the car out of there and maybe, I mean, he wouldn't have finished really high up, but maybe get something out of there? Or did you think that the FIA kind of made the call and said, you're out a little fast?
I'm honestly not sure. I think that was the stuck throttle issue, right? Was he couldn't get back out of the barrier.
He was.
I think that's just more that sounds like an issue that we had last race that hopefully should have been resolved, but is not resolved, and yet another thing that Ferrari should work out.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Any other things from the back markers besides obviously Leclerc that stood out? Go ahead.
My one thing, just because I obviously have another thing for analysis paralysis later, the Alfa Romeo Bottas strategy to go hard, pit for hard, leave him stuck there, had to pit again for medium, so dropped him back to 14th. So that didn't work very well for him at all. So.
Yeah, and then as, you know, obviously K-Mag retired, and then Mick Schumacher basically was a victim of the safety car ruining their strategy. Both Haas's, they had just pitted. It looked like they had committed to the two-stop strategy, and then the safety car just, you know, scuttled that for them, and they were left basically hanging, and this is what you get when you get shuffled to the back with a late pit stop that you've already committed to.
And then I think K-Mag ran into Vettel at one point, and then I think Schumacher into Latifi.
Schumacher spun.
Yeah. Somebody, I think it was Joe, maybe. Yeah, there were a lot of adventures in this back little area that happened. But yeah, so other than that, nothing too exciting.
All right, we will leave the back markers in the back, and we'll trouble them no longer. So we will now move into the midfield, where we had P12 was Pierre Gasly, P11 was Sebastian Vettel. He had quite the battle at the end of the race with his teammate. That would be P10 and Lance Stroll. P9 was Daniel Ricciardo. P8 was Esteban Ocon. P7 was Lando Norris. P6 was Fernando Alonso. P5, Carlos Sainz with a recovery drive starting from P19. And in P4, we'll have to talk about this as well, was Sergio Checo Perez. So notice who we haven't yet said. When we get to our podium, you'll figure that one out in a minute. But D, initial thoughts in the midfield?
So I'll admit we didn't really see much of 6th through 12. But except for Lance Stroll almost killing his teammate at the final corner there over a single point for the same team. But whatever, neither here nor there. I will say, though, other than that, in Stroll's defense, he qualified behind Vettel, but legitimately beat him on pace throughout the course of the race. So that was probably his most impressive drive of the season. Granted, Vettel did have one adventure somewhere else, but we'll try to give him credit every now and then. So Lance Stroll.
It's been a long year. It's been a tough year for Aston Martin and Seb.
Yeah, but then all of the Alpine McLaren stuff, I have a good feeling you're going to know a lot more about that than I do.
Fair. I did have that kind of on my other screen. The ding-dong battle between, well, first of all, Lando starting P5, Fernando, I think, started P7. Fernando Alonso, dude can still get it off at the start. A tremendous move to hold the outside line, I believe on the outside of turn 2, promotes him up to, at one point, was P5. And then I believe it was George Russell had to get back around him. So, you know, it was P6. The McLaren strategy, at least from their perspective, was going to be they were going to try to extend on the medium tire, and that's where they thought maybe they were going to possibly be able to jump Alonso because they clearly didn't have, at least on the medium tire, they didn't have the initial pace. So the safety car comes in and basically scuttles all of whatever Alpine or McLaren were going to try to do to each other because everybody came in, everybody put in the hard tire, and everybody pretty much went to the end. So you basically got a pace battle. Norris had some initial early pace on the hard tire, probably used it up to get within a DRS a couple of times on Fernando, and then after that, Fernando just kind of went away. This was the first race with McLaren on the new spec of upgrades, and you tend to see at least in the midfield now, you look at what Alpine did when they had their upgrades. Good one-lap pace, followed by kind of a ho-hum race for the first couple races until they get kind of on top of what that new package is really going to do. So I'm not surprised that Lando, put out a special lap. He got himself up to P5. That was fun to watch. I'm like, hey, let's go here. But I'm also not surprised that they fell back a little bit and that they haven't figured out quite how to optimize that package in race trim yet. So I'm hoping there's more to come. But Ocon was faster than Ricciardo and Alonso was faster than Norris today. So I can't be upset with the double points finish. And this is probably legitimately where they were. Mm-hmm. In terms of the battle, I mean, Ocon did get a 5-second penalty early, which I guess I thought you couldn't take it if you were pitting under a safety car. Apparently, I'm wrong about that. I guess you can take your 5-second penalty with a pit stop, even under safety car conditions, because I think that's how Ocon had to have cleared it.
Yes, he did. I'm trying to think about that. I thought you couldn't either. But I feel like I also thought that you couldn't do that either, and I feel like it did happen recently, and I was proved wrong. But I can't remember.
Well, I have to be proved wrong here because there's only one pit stop for him.
Yeah.
So he obviously was able to do that. Ricciardo got by him on the pit stop, and then Ocon passed him on track. Yep. So, it's for a track that, at least as a McLaren fan going into it, that I was kind of actually nervous about when I didn't know that there was an upgrade coming. I feel better about it. It sucks that they lost the battle for P4 today, but they're much more in the fight, I think, now than they were even a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So at least I'm hey, fair play to Alpine. Fernando drove a great race, managed the pace, was at the front of the midfield the whole time, and just kept, Lando far enough away to where it was probably affecting the aero, but close enough to where he really couldn't do anything. So it really wasn't an overtaking fest in the midfield like we're kind of used to, but strategy-wise, Fernando drove, I thought, a tremendous race.
Yep, and I think we now have a very, very clear 4 and 5 in the constructors.
Yeah, we know what we're going to see, and these two are going to go at it.
Yep.
Now that they're both on their new upgrade packages, I'm actually very excited about McLaren's chances next weekend because that was a race I was targeting, saying, okay, they're down on straight line speed. It's more of a kart track. Let's see what they can do at the Hungaroring. So that's kind of where I'm targeting them to try to get back into this fight. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. All right. So moving into now our podium.
Wait.
Oh, nope. We haven't talked about Checo yet. We have to talk about Checo before we leave this. We haven't talked about Sainz yet. Oh, yeah.
We got a lot.
Yes. So the trials, okay. Should we do Checo first and then do Sainz?
Yeah, Checo feels easier.
Okay. So Sergio Perez, who had a bad Friday, had a much better Saturday, so he ended up qualifying in P3. The race pace wasn't all that great, but I think the moment of his day comes down to the virtual safety car, which was brought out by, I believe, I want to say this was the Joe Granu retirement, but even though he was still classified with only 3 or 4 laps to go, kind of an odd end to the VSC in that we got the ending message first, and it's supposed to go back to green within 5 seconds of that. You just don't know when. But then they brought the VSC back out and apparently didn't tell a whole lot of people very well. And then flashed very quickly the ending message again. And George Russell, who finishes in P3, did what I like to call the F2 VSC move, because this move was perfected when the VSC came in to, I think it was back when it was still called GP2. And the one that I'm thinking of is specifically a Monaco race where somebody did this exact thing where they held way back. They waited. They were going to try to game the beep, and Russell gamed the beep and caught Perez napping. And Perez had never seen that move done before because why? We've only had the VSC at the F1 level. He never came up with it and saw anybody try to do that before. And this is where George's actually youth paid off for him.
It was a very Alonso-esque move, I think. The kind of crafty, using the rules to all of their limits. That was just fun to watch. Although, we'll get to George in a second. But yeah. Perez, though, it just wasn't really close on pace at all. This was very much a step back this weekend. It wasn't great. And he did legitimately on pace get beaten by 2 Mercedes. So.
Yeah, very true. He was the vulnerable one of the Red Bulls. And I mean, even if that move doesn't happen, it's possible that Russell still gets him.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, it was the nice flashpoint of the race. But I still actually think on pure pace, I think you're right. I think this is probably where he probably deserved to have finished. But maybe he was one position better because of the trials and tribulations of, again, our favorite hard luck case. I don't really know what else to say. It almost feels like the Annie musical at some point. The sun will come out tomorrow, and when for one Carlos Sainz, who starts from P19, and I think I put in my notes later, I've been driving up and down our interstate this weekend. He passed more cars than I did going up and down our interstate this weekend. So talk about having your hard race to deal, but he dealt with it. And he was fast, man. He just tore through the field like something else. Could have possibly had a podium. And Deanna, I'll let you explain why it didn't happen.
All right, Carlos Sainz. This poor man also had almost none of his many overtakes shown on TV.
That's true.
Separate issue. So here we go. So his teammate spins, causes a safety car. Sainz started on the hard tires. At this point, I guess in Ferrari's defense, we didn't know if we were going from a 1 or 2 stop, but basically Ferrari committed in their heads at that time to a 2 stop for Sainz and pitted him under the safety car for mediums. I'll get into my thoughts on that choice in a second. Under that safety car, or in that pit stop, they were incredibly slow getting one of the tires on, and then unsafe released him straight into the path of Albon and got him a 5-second penalty on top of that. So then he goes out, he kind of goes through the field. I think he goes from like P8 all the way up past Perez to P3. Now, while he's battling Perez, this was in turn 13, about a corner before the pit entry, let me back up, about 5 laps. They're deliberating, Sainz and Ferrari, do we come in? Do we not come in? Sainz wants to come in. Ferrari wants him to stay out. Blah, 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 blah. They keep telling him to stay out. So then he starts battling with Perez. And then a corner before the pit entry, they're like box as he's going wheel to wheel, side by side with Perez. And Sainz is like, no, I'm not doing that. Passes Perez. So then we think that they're just going to leave Sainz out for the rest of the race. But nope, we're going to pull him in with 10 laps left for another set of mediums. And he has to refight all the way back. I think it was from back from
Comes
8th
out,
or 9th.
I think, in 8th.
Yeah. Serves his 5-second penalty that they got him earlier. Has to battle back through and ends up P5.
Yeah, the timing of the radio message. I mean, if you remember a few weeks ago in Canada when I had my McLaren pit stop rant, I'm really missing James because I really wanted to get his rant on this because it's the same problem. It's the groupthink strategy thing again. I don't understand. And this is across not just Ferrari, but it was a McLaren problem too. It's different teams. Why is there not one strategy czar? Whatever the debate is, at the end of the day, you can bring it up to whoever that person is. If that's Mattia, it's fine. If it's Lauren Menkes, it's fine. That says, we're doing this. That's the end of the debate. At some point, the debate has to stop because look at what you did. Like, Sainz literally said, all right, you're going to keep me out? Well, fuck it. I'm just going to use my pace and use this up, and whatever happens, happens. Meanwhile, as his right front is blistering really badly, it looked like it was about to burst. But that's neither here nor there. What is he supposed to do? I feel like if he was a poet, he should have yelled, stop inventing again, because they did it again. I couldn't believe that they were actually managing to do it again. Now, and that's after the trauma of Leclerc going out and the non-ability to then execute a pit stop on the other car. So I don't understand what part of the decision. There is part of the decision tree here that is broken. They have to learn how to fix it.
Or at this point, if you're going to let Sainz call his own strategy, just listen to him.
Just let it go.
Instead of using 5 laps to deliberate. So here are my couple things, other notes that I have on this. So I think if you were going to bring Sainz in, You have that discussion a lot earlier, and you give him a lot more time to come through the field. Yep. So he finished off, I think, 28 seconds off the lead. In the end, had they brought him in, let's say 5 laps earlier, he was lapping 2 seconds a lap faster than all of the leaders. So that's kind of generous because it depends on traffic, blah, 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 blah. But you add 10 seconds, that puts him back to where Russell and Perez were. So he would be back battling for P3 had he had 5 extra laps. With only 10 laps, it just was not enough. But also, other point, second thing, so they should have probably just left him out on mediums because he got all the way up to P3, but let's say he dropped back to P5. He had, I think, 23 seconds to Alonso and P5.
He had enough of
even with 5-second penalty, that'd be 18 seconds. He had enough of a buffer, so just risk it at that point. You only have 10 laps, leave him out. Now, what they should have done is not pitted him on the safety car, left him out on the hards, and so switch onto the mediums with about 20 laps to go. So you would only have to have 1 pit stop instead of 2. Also, probably wouldn't have a 5-second penalty because you didn't unsafe release into anybody. So that would give you about 30 seconds in hand, and he finished 28 seconds behind Verstappen. So I think they legitimately gave up P2 today by pitting him under that safety car. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same exact thing that I ranted about what they did to Lando the other time. When you start the car on hard tires, like somebody has to put the rules of F1 somewhere. When you start on hard tires, your only option is to go plan A, and if anything, extend past that. That's the only way that strategy is ever going to work for you. Safety car windows almost be damned. And even if other cars would have been faster, he was the dominant car on the track the entire weekend on a fresh engine on a track with some really long straights.
Yeah.
He would have been fine. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Again, the decision-making process. Were they so traumatized that somebody again forgot to figure out what was going on? Never mind the initial radio message of the now invented penalty that I didn't know existed, the 5-second stop go, which I've looked around in my rule book. I didn't find that today.
But overall, I think there are 3 better options. The not pitting under the safety car and doing what you should have done, then leaving him out and letting him try to battle for P3, P5 at the worst, or pitting him earlier and giving him a better shot to come back all the way up to P3. And then also kind of salt in the wounds is the only person to run mediums all the way to the end was Gasly, and his pace kept up with everybody else around him. So he probably would have been fine and probably would have gotten P3.
Yeah.
So it's just,
I think
salt in the wounds.
The only defense that I have heard was that at least it consolidated the P5 and the fast. I mean, they at least scored 11 points as opposed to 0. But I don't know that at this point that matters.
No.
His championship he's not really battling anybody for his position in the drivers. The constructors already basically flew the coop once Leclerc spun out. So did really the drivers at that point. Why not go for broke with the fastest car?
Yeah.
To me, I would say trust your guy.
Agreed.
And maybe that's the ultimate thing that maybe they just didn't. Maybe they just don't yet. But and that's then a much bigger issue. But I guess we will
today.
Go ahead.
It's just there's some structural issues in Ferrari, and I hesitate to start firing people because they did make a huge leap from last year. But I think especially that strategy team, I think needs a bit of an overhaul. But yeah, there were just a lot of failures from the team. Yeah. I think the best and only person, and I think all of Ferrari that didn't make a mistake this weekend was Carlos Sainz.
Fair. I think that is completely fair. So we will leave it there. And then we will get into the podium. Hey, look, the Mercedes don't suck right now because P3 was George Russell. Again, if he finishes a race, he finishes somewhere in the top 5. That streak continues. P2, did y'all forget Lewis Hamilton is still not really a bad race car driver? Yeah. Only 10.5 seconds off the lead today. So, Toto Wolff, I'm not believing you anymore on Friday when you say your team sucks. I'm done. I am totally done with that narrative. If I hear it anymore, I'm going to start throwing things because it makes me annoyed.
Yep.
But that pales in comparison to the benefactor of all of the Ferrari drama, who really didn't have to do a whole lot after Leclerc spun, Max Verstappen, just kind of managing the pace, and the easiest 25 points he's probably ever going to score.
Yep. I think kind of going back to the Mercedes, that's definitely the more interesting topic here. That was legitimately the first time that they have beat a Red Bull on pace, and I think they still have some issues with qualifying pace. I just don't think it works that well for them, but luckily there's just such a gap to Ferrari and Red Bull that it doesn't matter, and I think that the other teams are kind of a little bit further behind. But that's where they're not really bridging that gap, but once you put that, like, fill the car up and let it go in race pace, it's getting a lot closer. Which is just fun to see, and just kind of seeing the life come back into that team. My one other comment was Russell freaking out about the Perez overtake, that he was very much in the wrong and just yelling about it for laps. It was like, just
I have a theory on that. I think that is because he's the appointed guy of the GPDA. Mm-hmm. And when you think you're that, whether it's like you almost put that hat on and go, I'm the representative of the GPDA, damn it. I know the rule book better than you. I was in the right. How dare you not take my side on this? And Toto, to his credit, was completely right to tell him, shut the fuck up and go back to racing. Yeah. Because that's exactly what you should do there. And that was kudos to Toto for doing that when he did.
Yep, I agree. Because, I mean, I would very much trust my team and all the cameras that they have versus my view being so low in the car with the giant wheels to be able to tell if I had a wheel in front of the other car. You just let it go. At that point, get your head down and keep going. That one, it just kind of made me laugh.
And this is it. Well, this one was funny, but I mean, we talked about, in the British Grand Prix when he gets out of the car, how kind of a dumb decision really that was, given what was going on with everything at the time. Just be the race car driver, dude. He's got a tremendous amount of talent. He's got a really good head on his shoulders, but sometimes it wanders a little bit.
Yep.
I think if that's the only thing that's wrong, it's not a whole lot.
No.
His game is really complete for his age, and I think he's going to be a tremendous driver, and he will probably be, once Lewis retires, him and Leclerc will be the challenge. Him, Leclerc, and Verstappen are going to have some ding-dongs in the next few years once Mercedes gets this car fully right, and it's coming. You're seeing it happen week by week by week. I mean, I know the Mercedes fan base, it's like if there's not a win, they're not happy, but this is getting closer. You can see it week after week after week.
Yep. And just yet again, maximizing points when Ferrari or Red Bull makes a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, but again, you have to be, like, my thought on Max is, at least, if nothing else, he's setting a standard. He's saying, here's the line. Come fight me over this line. And if nobody comes up to it, he wins. It was really that simple. Leclerc was over the line and was going to have a fight with him and couldn't stay there. And for whatever reason, right now, nobody is willing or able, people are willing to, but they're not able to fight Max in the arena consistently enough to put on a really good championship. And it looks like I said, I think he's got 3 fingers on that trophy and more to come maybe in the next couple of races. So if there's not a response from Ferrari by next weekend, if they don't pull back something, I think you're looking at maybe game over.
Yep, I agree.
Because the math gets worse and worse.
Yep. And another one of my somebody responded to my tweet today and said that Max has more wins from Leclerc poles than Leclerc has from Leclerc poles.
Wow.
Oh, man. He just puts his head down, gets it done, though.
Yep, yeah. Well, and the old Ron Dennis-ism, to finish first, you must first finish.
Yes.
Reared its ugly head yet again today. All right. Before we take a quick break, just thoughts, because this is probably our last French Grand Prix. I know you were looking really much forward to it. What was your kind of overall thoughts on the track, what we kind of saw before we get into fan emails and open up the floor to other opinions?
I'm now no longer sad to leave this track. I forgot just how disorienting the runoffs are. And it's really just unfortunate to watch. Like, the cars look incredibly slow going through there. And like all the camera angles were super weird. I'll go somewhere else in a second, but like the first few laps, it was Leclerc and Verstappen battling, and then Perez and Hamilton, I think. And they were only all a few seconds apart, but there was no camera angle where you could see both battles happening. And it's just a very bizarre setup, and it's just one giant open parking lot, essentially. So it just bothers me. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I think it's just...
despite...
my other point is that I just think, like you said earlier, the corners in it are too narrow. And they were talking about how it's easy to overtake here. Like, there have been a lot of overtakes in the past, but they're just, I don't think, not a quality, overtake. Right. That, like, we got
a lot of them are DRS assisted.
Or last weekend in Austria. And it's just not, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I heard an interesting factoid, actually, and I will totally credit one Bob Varsha in the post-race show on the national feed that I was interacting with this morning, gave a really good factoid about the history of this track. This was Bernie Ecclestone's private track that he owned, and the original plan for it, when he brought it back to the calendar, or when he proposed to bring it back to the calendar, was to host a race with no fans. Was to host a race with just VIP people. And that was the original intent. So I don't think this was ever going to be... I mean, kudos to the crowd that came out, number one. I feel this was probably the best attended French Grand Prix I could ever see. And kudos to everybody who cooked in the sun all weekend. But as an entertainment spectacle, or as just an F1 spectacle, I do think France deserves a race, but not here. So I'm not sad to lose this track, at least, off of the calendar, at least moving forward. I did pose the question on Twitter, and it was pretty much universal when I got back as a response. I don't think anyone out there, unless you're French, and if you are, we're sorry to leave you. We will hopefully come back. Hopefully Magna Chorus can come back to the calendar. That would be a track I would totally be in support of. I get the heritage. France, like I said, deserves a Grand Prix, but just not here. So I guess we will leave that there. So we will take a break. We will pay a couple bills, and we'll come back. We'll recap the drivers and constructors standings following this hot and slick race. We'll get into your thoughts, the fan email segment. We'll talk about our awards. We'll get into our predictions game. Somebody had a pretty good week. Come on back. We'll find out who did. All right, welcome back to Season 4, episode number 29 of the Outlaw F1 podcast. It's our French Grand Prix race review. And as always, we're proud members of the Ship It Studios podcast network. We just got through talking about a very hot and slick and championship important race. So Dee, let's find out, where did everybody fall out in the driver's standings?
Yes, so leading the championship and extending his lead is Max Verstappen on 233 points. And in second is still Leclerc on 170. In third, only 7 points behind, is Sergio Perez on 163. And in fourth is Sainz with 144. And now in fifth is Russell, only 1 point behind him. In sixth is Lewis Hamilton on 127 points. Norris is seventh with 70. Ocon is eighth with 56. Bottas is ninth with 46. And rounding out the top 10 is Fernando Alonso with 37.
All right, so our updated team standings are as follows. Red Bull Racing, and looks like they have gone pretty clear now. They are in P1, 396 points for them. In second is Ferrari on 314. In third is Mercedes on 270. Be interesting to see where that fight takes them. In fourth is now Alpine solo in that possession on 93 points. In fifth is McLaren on 89. Sixth is Alfa Romeo on 51. Seventh is Haas Ferrari on 34. 8 is the AlphaTauri team on 27. P9 is Aston Martin on 19. And P10, looks like they can sometimes I think they're going to score more than this. Williams, still only on the 3 points, but more potential, I think, coming down the pipe now with that new upgrade. All right, so enough of our opinions. This is, I think, one of my favorite segments where we open up the floor to you, the fan. So, Dee, as James would say, it's your time to shine. Let's get at the fan emails.
All right, starting with Rachel Fleming. 2 thoughts. Was Danny Rick's post about saying for about staying at McLaren for next season, about him pleasing his fans, or a dig at McLaren saying you can't get rid of me easily. As for the race, Ferrari once again betting it. Sainz might have got Lewis if the team hadn't done that stupid release in the pits. Will there be a point in the season where Ferrari actually get a race strategy right, or am I expecting too much from them? Because at the moment, Red Bull are running riot.
I think that is a perfect 4-line paragraph of this race recap, kind of all over the place. Thank you very much, Rachel. We appreciate your contributions. They are awesome. We love reacting to them. I can put in a little bit about the Daniel Ricciardo thing. I saw the big story in the pre-race build-up, the long interview with Ted Kravitz about it. I think he's going to, at least for now, we know we've got all sorts of IndyCar drama, but I think in the F1 seat, it's Daniel's seat so long as he wants to sit in it. I think he's at least going to see out this contract. And if it takes a little bit of fire for him to come back a bit, that's okay. I'm okay with that because there have been way too many occasions where just Lando was getting more out of the car than he was. And yeah, so if he got a little bit of fiery this weekend and it worked for him, that's good. I want to see that. More of it. 2 consecutive races in the points. Yes, love it. Want more of it. Because he's got to be in this fight. If McLaren have any chance at P4, the other car has to score. It's that simple. And I think when I looked at it, I still think Lando has scored something around the 85 or 84% mark of the team's total points. So, yeah, we still need more from Danny, but I'm glad that he's showing the fire, and that's good. So, yeah, a fiery Daniel might be a fast Daniel. Let's hope that. As for Ferrari, we talked about all of this. The stupid release in the pits. Why would you even pit him there? I think we've come to agreement on that. Will they ever get it right? Well, if they can fix their process, I think it is not necessarily a strategy call thing. I think it is a procedural issue going on with that team. But D, what's your
They at least, in their defense, they almost got Austria right if it weren't for a blown engine.
True.
But yeah, also the Danny Rick, I'm also fine with them kind of lighting the fire under him. And I don't think that – I think McLaren wants him to be on Norris's level, not have to deal with all of this drama. They don't want to do that. I think they really like him as a person, I'm sure.
Correct.
But it's just you can't have –
This was Zach's guy. He was Zach's guy.
Yeah. So, but also some interest with the one of the IndyCar potential replacements had a very good weekend this weekend. Pato O'Ward coming in second and first. So yeah, hopefully that.
And Rosenqvist didn't have a bad weekend either.
No,
he was in the top 10, I think, in both races. Well,
no, he crashed out of the first one. Correct. But he was running well until he did crash. It was a rough weekend for Pillow, though. I think he might have been the worst Ganassi car today, which is when was the last time that ever happened.
Right.
Anyway, that's side tangent, whatever. Moving on.
At one point, I think we're going to launch the Outlap IndyCar podcast.
Yeah.
You and I will just kind of
talk about Indy. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
There's so much to talk about there.
Yes.
So next up, Dave Doherty says, thoughts on Mercedes?
I think we talked on it. Like I said, I'm done listening to Toto Wolff or Lewis Hamilton or George Russell bash the car on a Friday. I get it's time for experimentation, but that car is getting better. The sleeping giant that is the Mercedes F1 team is beginning to wake up. They're getting closer every week, at least in race pace. I can see it. You can just see the margins. You know, this is P2 and P3. I saw in prep for tonight, I was just listening to the BBC take on it, and their take on it was don't believe this result. And I'm not with that. I'm seeing progress. I think this is close to real, and I think by the end of the season, you're going to be seeing Red Bull and Mercedes battling it out. If Ferrari can't keep it on track, it doesn't matter, and these might be your two protagonists at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it's very much between whatever the BBC said and what Paul DeResta was saying in the middle of the race. They're not challenging for the win quite yet, but I don't think this is a false flag by any means. So I think they're getting there. I think if anything, this honestly makes me very, very excited for 2023 because they're catching up and they're catching up quick. So hopefully next season we can Ferrari could figure out some issues and we can get a three-way fight here.
You can actually have 6 cars with a chance to win every week.
Yes. So that is my hope on that one.
Yeah.
Next up, the formula says, I feel like the whole world F1 is on an episode of Punk'd as we watch Ferrari themselves into mediocrity. It doesn't feel real. They can't possibly be this unorganized and confused every weekend, can they? Side note, Alonso went under the radar a bit this weekend. Also, Sainz is the best Ferrari strategist. I wholeheartedly agree with that Sainz take.
Yeah, no, completely agree with the Sainz take. My quote, I think, of this season, I'm going to keep using it until I get sick of it, is stop inventing. Stop inventing. But I mean, yeah, they designed such a fast, competitive, awesome looking, awesome performing race car. Why is it through one reason or another? And it's always something different. It's never like if they just fix this. Sometimes it's Leclerc. Sometimes it's the strategy. Sometimes it's the engine that decides to go boom. It's never one thing. So it's like if it was the same problem, you could isolate it and you could really diagnose it. It just feels like, you know, you get in the crucible and they fold, and I don't get it because they're better than this. I know they're better than this.
Fully agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, John Scott says, I think after the French Grand Prix, we have seen everything Ferrari can throw at Red Bull and the ending of the Leclerc relationship with the Scuderia. He will be at Mercedes when Lewis retires. I mean, I kind of laughed. Somebody tweeted, Charles is probably regretting that 5-year contract right about now. So,
well, he's making enough money. I don't know how much he's really going to regret it. You would want to have some mega buyout clause get enacted if he's jumping ship. I don't see that happening. At least not in the immediate future. I mean,
no.
You know, who knows? Maybe 5-6 years from now, where the landscape of this is really going to look or where it's going to be. But it's going to take. If Mercedes want him, they got to pull out the checkbook big time. You know, it's going to be Lewis Hamilton type money again. And I don't know that Mercedes are going to necessarily want to do that because they've got people in their pipeline too that they would like to kind of usher in, you know, when Lewis does decide he wants to step away. And
I also think they've put the eggs in the Russell number one basket. I don't think it is worth the money that it would be to get Leclerc. And I don't think as long as the car is competitive, Leclerc will be there. No matter how frustrating I think this whole situation is about to get for him over the next couple years. Hopefully they can iron some of that stuff out. But yeah, it might be kind of rough, but as long as the car's fast, I don't see him budging.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an emotional, sadly, I think if you're a Ferrari fan, I think in the immediate, what you're going to have is this emotional roller coaster of one weekend, they look like world beaters and they're going to come back at it. And then the next weekend they pull something like this. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Thoughts and prayers. Next up. Mike McPherson, F1, says, Checo caught napping, best ever. That was a fun little move by Russell.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the classic. Like I said, I've seen it when it was GP2, when the Prix SC first came in, people would hang back and try to game that beep. And George did it perfectly, executed it perfectly. Checo never saw it coming.
Yep. A couple more. Chad Depew says Ferrari going to Ferrari, and Buckeye Bulldog says gutted for Ferrari. They had the fastest car again. Yes, it's all very frustrating. And then
very true.
Props to Max for being so consistent. Crash Tappen days are behind us, and Leclerc just isn't on that level of consistency yet. Merc has a race car overall, quite a good French Grand Prix. I will have to say, I think, this is probably the second big mistake for Leclerc this year. But yeah, Max has been unreal.
Well, Max has put it really simple. Here's the line. Come fight me at this level. And sometimes Leclerc can be at that level and has taken it to him. Like in Austria, that was clearly better. They were clearly better than the Red Bull there. They were probably clearly better than the Red Bull here. And they just couldn't stay at that level. And Max is just more than willing to just, this is it. And this is what I got to do. And I have the high ground. That's what happens when you have the high ground. You can do this.
All right. And John Castagino I screwed that
John
up.
Castagino.
Thank you.
He just tweeted us the Gunther Steiner meme when talking about Ferrari of "we look like a bunch of wankers." So thank you very much for the meme there. And then we also, again, asked the question, we talked about this earlier, about keeping the French Grand Prix on the calendar. I think it is a universal no from you, the fans. So we thank you very much for the feedback there. So we will move on and into our awards as we start off with our Rubbish Award. Don't know if we're going to have full compliance on this one, but it'll be interesting. Dee, let's kick us off. What you got?
Ferrari, just as a whole, the pit crew, the strategy, the kind of communication over, like, with Sainz, Leclerc, it was just, it was a mess. Absolute mess.
All right. I've got one for Ferrari, but that's probably later on in the awards, and I think we all kind of know what award that they're going to probably win today. So my rubbish will actually go out to, and I alluded to this earlier, I think I've said it twice now. I am done listening to Mercedes and all of the drivers and Toto Wolff and whoever else they want to try out in the team principal's press conference dogging on their car on a Friday. The Friday complaint department routine, I'm so done with it. You have a good but not great car, and it's okay to say that. So we'll just leave that there. And my runner-up actually goes out to the FIA. And I don't understand why the FIA sometimes doesn't want to breed good racing when we actually change the entire package. I thought at maybe this track we might actually get some good racing, and then we have the conditions all set up for a two-stopper, and the FIA extends the pit lane limiter when we've had no prior history of issues with this track, extended it past like these three other garages that added, I think, 7 seconds to the estimated pit lane loss. Congratulations, you just wrapped up a one-stop when conditions screamed for a two-stop. So what did you see again? You saw the classic problem with a one-stopper. Lift and coast, saving the tires when you didn't necessarily need to. That's not what the fans pay their good money. There were a lot of people in the heat today who wanted to see some better racing. They could have had it. You should have just left the pit lane alone. There was no issue with it.
Didn't even know about that one.
All right.
That all makes sense now.
So, and John chimed in as well. His rubbish is Leclerc and Ferrari, both completely crack under the pressure again and throw away what would have been potentially a 40-point swing. 40 points that didn't happen with the Scuderia today. And I imagine James would probably be somewhere in the ballpark here.
Yes.
I'm waiting.
I imagine it would be Matteo Binotto. Would have been his. Yeah,
we may have the hashtag "Stay with us" might be back.
Yes.
By the end of this race. All right, so we move on to the analysis paralysis. This may be a clean sweep here. John has gone with the prancing idiots, not the prancing horse at Ferrari. Dee, what's your thought on this?
I'm going Ferrari for not covering off Max with Leclerc, for pitting Sainz under the safety car, for messing up that pit stop, for then bringing Sainz in with only 10 laps left and arguing about it on the radio and not making a decision and just being an absolute disaster and really screwing up a podium, a probably easy podium for Sainz.
Yeah, like I think I put that. How is this not Ferrari? Between the pit stop, the groupthink strategy desk, Leclerc, maybe that counts somehow as analysis paralysis because he was thinking too much and then he put the car on the white line and he spun it out. Who knows? But it's their award for a reason, and they just landed the plane quite nicely for this one. So I think it's a slam dunk. Ferrari win our analysis paralysis. Going away this weekend. All right. Moving now into our dark horse. This could be kind of interesting. Dee, what's your thoughts on the dark horse of the day?
I'm going for Mercedes, again, for legitimately beating a Red Bull on track. And I know you love how they say on Friday that they're not going to be on the pace. And then there they were on Sunday.
Yeah. Knock that off, Toto. I'm not, let me put it this way. I'm not buying it anymore. He can say it all he wants. I'm done agreeing with it. I'm done looking at the Twitter feed of all of that when the entire Mercedes fan base goes, oh no, it's terrible. Our season's over. No, it's not. You might finish P2 in the constructors if you play your cards right. And that ain't not bad considering where this car was at the beginning of the season. So I will go Fernando Alonso. Just because I got to see the back of the car from my Lando viewpoint today. Awesome start. Got, like I said, the 3 or 4 cars that he got on the start. Just proves he still got it. That kept him in front of Lando all day and managed that battle perfectly. I really can't complain about anything that he did. And it gives Alpine P4 in the constructors for now. Not saying that battle's done, but they get it. And they legit deserved it today. So they have P4 for now. So John he's going with the Mercedes team. He's going to give it to Lewis Hamilton. Hell of a start and defended throughout the race for another good result. He is inching closer, P3, now it's P2. And I actually think if you're a Mercedes fan, this next weekend is where you should put your eggs in your basket to go out for a win, because it's not as engine dependent. I think it might. Lewis Hamilton loves this track. Even in the 2013 year when Mercedes car was not good before they switched over to the hybrids, this was a track that Lewis Hamilton got his first win in the Mercedes with. So I'm thinking this could be where your chance. All the Mercedes fans that want to see Lewis Hamilton, he's got 300 Grand Prix starts, needs another win on his docket. He might get it next weekend. He could be the dark horse for the win next weekend. So we'll find out. All right. So moving on to our driver of the day. D, what you got?
I have Carlos Sainz for, despite everything that Ferrari threw at him, still battling from the back of the field to P5. Should have been better, but he did absolutely every single thing he could in his power. So really just on pace the entire weekend. A lot of times looked better than Leclerc. So just great weekend overall. The only person in Ferrari that had a good weekend. Carlos Sainz.
Agreed. I wish they gave him a better looking photo on the F1 Twitter though. That photo looks, I don't know the lighting is weird or something.
He looks like he's like 80 years old.
Yes, he looks like he's like ancient. Like he's like 24, I think. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
He's 27.
Anyway, John agrees with you.
One of the ones that I'm younger than, and I have to enjoy that as long as I can.
Well, hey, I got Fernando here, so geez, still rocking it.
Yeah.
So I'll keep that one going as long as I can. So John agrees with you. He's giving it to Carlos Sainz, even with the air quote shitty pit release. He easily gets P3, if not for the idiots in the box. Maybe the reason they chose their uniforms to look like McDonald's is because they know they are clowns like Ronald McDonald. That's a shot across the bow. All right. I'm going to agree with all of you on this. I will give it to Carlos Sainz. As I said earlier, he literally passed more cars than I have this weekend, going up and down I-294. And if you're in Chicago, you know how much fun and how ripped up that interstate is. So I was passing people left and right who didn't know how to drive it. And Carlos Sainz was passing people left and right because he was on the pace throughout the entirety of the weekend. I agree with you. We should have some sort of an incentive for qualifying, because he would have put it on pole. I would have loved to have seen what the delta would have been with him and Max going at it in Q3 this weekend, especially with that fresh engine. All right. So we will now move into our predictions. And D, you've had yourself a hell of a weekend. You take the top spot. You got our 3 points. You got the pole sitter. You got the fastest quality time. And you correctly predicted Max on the podium. So P1 on the podium goes to you. James finishes in second. He has 2 points. He got the pole sitter, and he got one of the prop bets. I finished with 1 point. I got Daniel Ricciardo in P9. So that saved me from the duck of 0. My slow lap times went right out the window. I saw that on Friday. I went, yeah, it didn't go so well. And John, he got 1 point. He had the fastest overall lap time with his predictions. So moving into the standings, it's John and Deanna in a tie for P1 on 29 points apiece. I'm still hopefully right on your heels. I have to get better at this next weekend. Just keep pace with you two. I'm on 27 points. And James is coming right along. He's chugging along there, getting closer every week, it seems. He's on 23. All right, so that will wrap up our French Grand Prix weekend. Deanna, any final thoughts before we turn the page and head over to the Hungaroring?
Yeah, I think It was an intriguing race. I enjoyed it. There were a lot of things that were happening, but I'm also not sad to see the French Grand Prix grow. I'm also now, though, I know I said this last week, kind of continuing on old school tracks with new regs. I am excited for the Hungaroring. I think especially compared to this track, there's a lot of overtaking side by side in past regs, like going through 2 and 3 and back up to 4. So I hope with these new regs, we get a lot more kind of the Silverstone, Austria, like that kind of situation that was happening. So I'm very excited for this weekend. I am very interested to see what Mercedes do. And yeah, it's going to be hopefully a fun one. Maybe some weather. I don't know. We get that from on occasion too.
I wrote in my notes here, you think it was hot in France? Wait till next weekend. I guess they had temperatures, I don't know what, 40 degrees Celsius. It just sounds hot.
104, I think. I only know that because I Googled it this week because that's what the temperatures were in the UK.
Okay. Well, for the love of God, stay cool if you're going to the race next weekend. I do know, I now can confirm, we'll have a full slate of F3 and F2. I totally botched that on the preview. I apologize for that. It's not the best weekend for our American Logan Sargent, even though he did put it on pole. He was unable to convert that. I believe he dropped the clutch on the pit stop in the feature race and did not score. I think he got P8 in the sprint race, but I believe now he's back in P3 in the overall driver standings in F2, but he's not far from P2, and he just needs another good result, and maybe he can get on the back. But it's Drugovic's F2 championship to lose at this point. So he's had. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I cut you off. I was just going to say update on the weather for next weekend is Saturday, high of 91, 50% chance of scattered thunderstorms, and Sunday, high of 84, 47% of scattered thunderstorms. So we will see.
Well, rain will be fun. Thunderstorms or not. I don't want to see any lightning delays or anything like that. That's no fun for anybody. Your start time, maybe get that pot of coffee or your card game or whatever else you do while you're kind of waiting through some rain delay theater. We'll have to see if that comes to fruition. But we'll be back on Wednesday night to get you all primed and ready for our last race before the summer break. And then next Sunday, we will be back to recap it all, kind of wrap up our first half of the season. And then we will take a much-deserved break because we've been doing a lot of episodes in a short amount of time. So for everybody who's stayed on with me throughout this, for James, for Deanna, John, we know we want you back as soon as we can, bud. We understand why. But again, it's always fun to do. I love doing it. And as always, may all your laps be fast.